ESPN started up with the Lakers and the Wizards. Lakers 8-11 since LeBron's been out. They're just 3 games from falling into the play-in tournament. And after that, 2 of the top 3 teams in the West square off. Suns hosting the Clips. They're 19-6 as LA since the All-Star break. It's time for the best mark in the NBA. Phoenix a game up on LA for second in the West. Time for a daily dose of Doug. Doug Kazarian, host of the Daily Wager, joining us from Las Vegas as the sunshine and the visage would indicate behind him. So, Doug, what is Vegas saying about tonight's NBA slate, starting with the first game of that doubleheader, the Lakers and Les Wizards?
Well, I will tell you as soon as I'm done processing myself on the vert there. That's a giant screen there. I don't know if I'm quite ready for that one, but we'll get into it. No, this is interesting. The Lakers were about 3.5-point favorites. There's been some buyback on the Wiz, who've been playing great except for the last game, but that was a tough situational spot on the schedule. And I think this one's tough for the Lakers given this lengthy road trip. I mean, the defense has been pretty poor, all things considered, as they're kind of focused on just reacclimating the brow, Anthony Davis, back into the offense alongside new guy for him, Drummond. And I think this is going to be a high-scoring game. Wizards offense has really picked up. They're sort of making a playoff push. So I'm going to go over 228.5 as we're going to see a lot of offense. Now in game 2, this Suns team has been all about the regular season. Every year we see a couple teams a little too focused on the regular season, and Phoenix is one of those. They're right on Utah's tails. Now, Clippers are 2 losses back. No Kawhi tonight. All signs point to Paul George playing. But Phoenix at full strength, meaning all their starters and their key reserves, when they're fully intact, they are a really tough team to beat. Just snapped New York's win streak at the Garden. I think Phoenix covers this 4. It feels high, and obviously the Clippers can shoot the 3, including their guys off the bench. But I think Phoenix with the Chris Paul at the helm.
Game up on the Clippers for the 2 seed in the West going into tonight's matchup, and you've won 10 of your last 12 best bets on this show, and Phoenix has been a part of some of those bets. What is your best bet for tonight?
Yeah, you know, the Raptors have been the thorn in my side, so we're not going to touch them. But I'm going to go to this Blazers-Grizzlies budding rivalry, if you will. They just played back-to-back games in Portland, and Memphis won both of them. Very heated game in a lot of ways, and we've seen this over-under trickle up, but I'm still going to go over here. Memphis is all about fast pace. They don't have a ton of scoring by like household names, but with Ja Morant at the helm, pushing the pace, and they are not afraid to chuck and duck, and Valanciunas has returned from his absence, and then the Blazers play no D and then play tons of offense, as we saw yesterday in the blowout win in Indy. Obviously, it helps when Simon starts 9 of 9 from downtown, but the Blazers at full strength, although Dame's still a little nagging injury, they can put up some points and certainly give up some points. So I think we see a trend here between these two teams going over again.
All right, so I want to recap this now. You're taking the over for Lakers-Wizards, Suns to cover the 4, and the over for the Blazers and the Grizzlies as the best bet. Much more of Doug.
NBA teams on a recent episode posted up with Chris Hayes. So one notable absence on this list, LeBron James. Here's what Dr. J had to say about that.
When you look at, LeBron and, anybody he sort of picks with him to be, playing with so many guys, he's the guy who has led the charge in terms of super teams being put together. Yeah. When he put together a team in Miami, basically put together a team together in Cleveland as well, and put together a team in Los Angeles or whatever. Mm-hmm. So he could pick his own team. I ain't gonna pick his team.
Max, what do you think? Should LeBron be penalized for playing with super teams?
Of course not. And by the way, I love Dr. J. I grew up loving Dr. J. But this is ridiculous. Dr. J, this is ridiculous. Who cares if the GM puts the team together or the player does? Let's look. Dr. J was the best player in the ABA. He was an ABA MVP. He was an ABA champion. He was an ABA scoring leader at double-digit rebounds. He's one of the all-time greats, and in fact has become underrated. He's in that top uppermost tier of greatest players ever. Let's look at that Sixers team he won a championship with when he was a little past his prime, but still an all-star. Maurice Cheek, see the all-star selections? 4-time all-star selection. Andrew Toney, a 20-point-a-game guy, 2-time all-star. Dr. J, one of the best players in the game. We're marketing now. We look back and say it was Magic Bird. But back then, the commercials were Dr. J versus Bird before they were Magic versus Bird. Ivoroni was a starting power forward, but Bobby Jones was off the bench, 6th man of the year. Moses Malone was the best player in basketball. People have funny memories about this. He used to give the Lakers and Kareem hell when he was in Houston, and he was an MVP. Went to the Sixers. He was the dude saying 4-4-4, meaning he's going to sweep everyone. Then went 4-5-4. Swept the Lakers in the finals. I mean, that's a super team. An MVP or multiple MVPs, multiple All-Stars. Who cares if the GM puts it together, Stephen A., or if the player does? That's one. Two, when you look at Dr. J's team, Stephen A., I don't think he knows really why he did it that way. It seems pretty obvious to me. The dudes he grew up watching and idolizing are all first team. The dudes he played against, who came a little later, we're all second team and no new dudes. Because one thing is for sure, you can put any combination of players you want on the all-time team. Two guys have to be on every all-time team. Michael Jordan and LeBron James. Those guys are on every all-time team. But the first team, those are the guys he idolized growing up because we always mythologize those people. And the other guys were the guys he saw and played against toward the end of his career especially. And he respects them. And the new dudes he doesn't have the same feeling for.
Well, first of all, let me say this before I even address the point. LeBron shouldn't be penalized. You're right about that. But I want to say that Hall of Famers like Dr. J have a right to feel the way that they feel. If I take issue with Dr. J, it's that Wilt and Bill Russell were on the same team. No, it's one or the other. You understand? It's one or the other. They went head to head against one another. They were the two iconic figures. You got to go at it. You got to pick one over the other.
Both centers.
You can't have them on the same team, number one. And number two, the great Karl Malone, one of the top scorers in NBA history, no doubt. I wouldn't have had him on either team because, to be honest with you, as good as Karl Malone was, particularly in pick and roll situations, pick and pop situations, and clearly on the break as well, he could finish. I think in terms of a back to the basket prototypical power forward, I would pick both Tim Duncan and Kevin McHale ahead of Karl Malone. I really, really would. In terms of 10 feet and in as a power forward, when the way the game was played, Karl Malone back to the basket couldn't touch those two. Couldn't touch him. I don't care what anybody says. Not in terms of back to the basket. He could shoot perimeter shots. John Stockton fit him in pick and pops, and on a fast break, sure. But in back to the basket, no. Tim Duncan, Kevin McHale. So I wouldn't put Karl Malone second team. Now to get to your bigger point. When you brought up the Philadelphia 76ers, here's what I think you're missing, Max Kellerman. Dr. J isn't talking about just super teams. He's talking about you instigating the process. Moses Malone was traded to the Philadelphia. It doesn't matter to you, but it matters to them. In other words, they can't control what they can control. When you talk to Hall of Famers, which obviously you know that I do, the position is what you instigate, what you look for, what you want.
Clearly.
Remember when Charles Barkley and LeBron James got into it? Because Charles Barkley was basically saying, what do you want, everything? I mean, damn, you don't want to compete? Now, obviously, Shaq and Kenny Smith came to the defense of LeBron James because they felt that Charles Barkley went too far when he questioned his willingness to compete at that particular moment in time. I'm just using that to crystallize the fact that when Hall of Famers compare themselves to other future Hall of Famers and they're looking at the game themselves, it's not just the circumstances that you're living with, it's what you instigate. Dr. J didn't instigate that. Andrew Toney was drafted in the second. Maurice Cheeks was drafted in the second round. Mark Ivoroni was drafted in the third round. I forgot where Andrew Toney specifically was picked, but those things happen. And so when I look at it from that perspective, I say, excuse me, Dr. J, no, I think he's wrong here because there's no way on earth you can have the second best player we've ever seen in the history of basketball, not even on one of the top two teams. That is ridiculous. That is blasphemous, and Dr. J is absolutely positively wrong. But as a Hall of Famer, I do understand what he is accusing LeBron of in terms of instigating something that Kevin Durant and others have now taken to another level.
Well, I hear what you're saying about the way Hall of Famers perceive it. I'm sorry, I just disagree with them. Of course they're entitled to feel. They built the game. They're entitled to feel however they want. I'm just saying in the end, you got to play ball. And if you're on a super team, I don't care as a fan if a GM put it together or if you put it together. Now, I take exception to what KD did with the Warriors. They were already a super team. He chose, I'm going to join them. They don't have to give anything up. I'm just going to join them. And at that point, no one has a chance to do anything. But you remember the Sixers that year when they got Moses Malone? It was like, oh, here they come. And they destroyed everybody. They swept the Lakers. So, that's Dr. J's championship. It takes a super team 9 times out of 10 to win a championship. I don't know if any of LeBron's Miami teams were better than that Sixers team.
No, but what you can't ignore is the point that Hall of Fame, and again, we're not getting on LeBron here because we both disagree with Dr. J. Okay, LeBron James, you can't have a first team in the NBA history without having LeBron James on it, as far as I'm concerned. But having said all of that, let's understand again what the point was. You say it doesn't matter whether the player or whether the team puts the